She murmured, "You don't understand me." I smiled. "Then I'll learn, one moment at a time." I noticed her before she noticed me. Though maybe that isn't true. Maybe she saw me first and chose not to let it show. She sat near the window, fingers curved around a mug that had long gone cold, as if the warmth still lived in her palm. The late afternoon light softened the lines at the corner of her mouth, but it didn't erase them. They looked earned, like something she had carried, not hidden. When she finally turned, her eyes held mine a second too long. Not enough for anyone else to catch, but enough for me to feel the silence fill with something I couldn't name. "Do you always stare this much?" she asked, tilting her head just slightly, a hint of a smile tugging at her lips. "Only when I forget to blink," I said, surprised at my own voice sounding steadier than my chest felt. She shook her head, brushing hair from her face, and looked back at the window. A quiet dismissal. But her hand lingered on the table, and mine was closer than it should have been. I didn't move it. Neither did she. There was no music in the cafe, no background noise to lean on. Just the faint clink of cups being stacked behind the counter, the hum of the fridge, the almost inaudible sound of her breath. It felt too quiet, like the whole room had agreed to listen. "People your age," she murmured, still not looking at me, "don't usually sit this still." I wanted to answer, but instead I watched her fingers trace the rim of her mug. The slow, unconscious circling. She had rings on, thin ones that caught the dying light, and when her little finger brushed against mine, it wasn't an accident. At least, it didn't feel like one. I breathed in, steadying myself. Coffee, paper, the faint trace of her perfume. Something warm, almost floral, almost sharp. It reminded me of evenings after rain. "You think you understand me," she said suddenly, turning back, eyes sharper now. Her voice wasn't harsh. It was soft, but it pressed in, like the weight of something unsaid. I swallowed. "I don't. Not yet." Her mouth curved. Not quite a smile, not quite a frown. "Then what are you looking for?" I wanted to tell her everything. That her presence made me restless in a way nothing else did. That every small gesture she made seemed magnified, pulled into focus. That she felt like a secret I wasn't supposed to touch. But the words stayed stuck. Instead, I shifted my hand, brushing hers lightly. A contact so small it could vanish if either of us pretended it hadn't happened. She didn't move away. The silence thickened. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with the unbearable closeness of her being there. I noticed the slight tremor in her breath, the way her eyes flicked down toward our hands, then up again to my face. "You don't understand me," she murmured at last, her voice breaking softer, closer. I leaned forward, my words slipping out before I thought better. "Then I'll learn. One moment at a time." Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but she didn't. She only looked at me, her eyes unreadable, searching. And just as I thought she might let herself answer, the door behind us swung open with a burst of noise. Laughter, footsteps, a rush of cold air. She pulled her hand back, straightened her posture, and looked away. But her unfinished gaze still clung to me, like something that refused to end. The door's interruption should have ended the moment, but it didn't. We sat across from each other, pretending to look at the people who had just walked in, but every sense in me stayed hooked on her. The way she smoothed her skirt, the way she avoided my eyes for a beat too long, as though if she met them again, something dangerous might spill out. "You shouldn't," she started, then stopped, pressing her lips together. "Shouldn't what?" Her gaze flicked back to me, sharp for half a second, then softened. "Nothing. Forget it." I didn't. She pushed her mug aside, the faint scrape against. The wood sounding louder than it should have. And maybe it was the tilt of her shoulders, or the slight sigh she let escape, but something in me wanted to ask the question I probably had no right to. "Were you waiting for someone else?" A small, humorless laugh left her. "Not anymore." The words carried weight, like they belonged to a story she wouldn't hand over yet. Her hand brushed her hair back, and for the first time I noticed the faint shadow of tiredness under her eyes. Not exhaustion from the day, but the kind that lingers over years. I wanted to ask more. I didn't. Instead, I studied the line of her wrist, the way her veins showed faintly under her skin. Vulnerability dressed in elegance. "You're quiet," she said. "You talk enough for both of us," I replied, smiling. Her eyes narrowed playfully, but there was something else underneath. A hesitation. A warning, maybe. "It's not a game," she whispered. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure if she was warning me or herself. Her chair shifted closer, not by much, but enough that I felt the warmth of her knee brush mine under the table. I kept still, afraid any sudden move would break the spell. The conversation stumbled forward, uneven. She told me about the city when she was younger, how she used to stay out all night, convinced she'd never grow tired of chasing moments. She said it like a confession, like someone remembering a version of themselves that no longer fit. I told her about moving here, about feeling small in a place too big. And though my voice was steady, I knew she heard the loneliness under it, because her hand reached up, unthinking, and touched my shoulder. It wasn't long, just her fingertips brushing fabric. But I felt it deeper than I should have. "You're too young to already sound like that," she murmured, almost to herself. I leaned in, catching the trace of her breath, warm, close enough to stir the air at my cheek. "And you're too graceful to sound so tired." She didn't smile. She just looked at me, her hand still resting lightly on my shoulder, as though she'd forgotten it was there. The cafe noise faded, the world shrank. Her fingers pressed the faintest bit harder, an anchor, a question, maybe an answer she didn't want to give aloud. Neither of us moved away, that we lingered longer than either of us meant to. The cafe had emptied, leaving only the low hum of the lights and the occasional shuffle of the barista cleaning up. Her hand slipped from my shoulder, but not before her thumb grazed the fabric like she'd forgotten how to stop touching me. I leaned back, tried to breathe. She leaned forward, as if caught between leaving and staying. Then the sharp chime of her phone broke the quiet. She glanced down, the glow lighting her face. Her jaw tightened. "I should," she whispered, then didn't finish. She pressed the phone face down on the table instead of answering it. "Someone waiting?" I asked. Her eyes flicked up, sharp, warning, then softer. "Always." I wanted to ask who, but I didn't. My throat tightened with a strange mix of jealousy and guilt, feelings I had no right to. Before I could speak again, the door opened. A man I vaguely recognized, someone from around campus, walked in. He scanned the room, waved at me, and headed for the counter. My pulse jumped. She shifted in her seat, tucking her hair behind her ear, pulling back her hand as if it had never touched me. For a moment, we were strangers again, sitting too close but pretending otherwise. "Relax," she murmured without moving her lips, her eyes still fixed on the window. But she wasn't relaxed. I saw it in the stiffness of her shoulders, the quick sip of water she didn't need. The man ordered, laughed with the barista, left without looking our way. The door closed. Silence returned. Her exhale was too audible, like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "You're afraid," I said quietly. Her gaze cut to me, sharp. "Of what?" I almost said, "of being seen with me." Instead, I just held her eyes. The silence stretched until it was too much. She shifted closer again, so close her knee pressed into mine under the table. A deliberate touch this time, not an accident. "Do you know what people would say?" she whispered. "Probably." Her breath brushed my cheek as she leaned in. Not a kiss, not even a promise of one, but the distance shrank to nothing. I could see the faint tremor of her lips, the soft tension in her jaw. "I don't want to be reckless," she said. But her hand found my wrist, thumb grazing the pulse there. "Then don't be," I murmured. "Just be here." Her eyes softened, as if my words had pulled something from her she didn't want to admit. Her fingers lingered on my skin, not moving, not leaving. The cafe door clicked again. Both our heads turned sharply, but it was only the barista dragging a trash bag out. She laughed, quiet, nervous, almost soundless, and didn't let go of my wrist. We sat there, trapped in the charged stillness, closer than we should be, neither moving forward, neither stepping back. The cafe closed around us without either of us noticing. Chairs flipped onto tables, lights dimmed one by one, until the barista gave us a polite smile that wasn't really a request, it was a dismissal. We stepped out into the cool night air, our breath rising faintly like smoke. She wrapped her scarf tighter, and I shoved my hands into my pockets, though I wanted nothing more than to keep them free, for her. We walked in silence for a block, our footsteps echoing off brick walls. Every so often our shoulders brushed. Each time, I thought she would pull away. She didn't. "You shouldn't walk me," she said at last, her voice too soft to carry. "Then why aren't you stopping me?" Her lips curved, faint but tired. "Because you're stubborn. And you don't mind," I countered. She glanced at me then, quick and sharp, but her eyes lingered too long. I felt the air shift between us. When we reached the corner where the street lamp buzzed overhead, she stopped. "Do you know how complicated this is?" she whispered. Her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from holding too much back. I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint lines etched at the corners of her eyes, the small scar just above her brow, the shadows of years I didn't yet know. "Tell me," I said. Her hands gripped the edge of her scarf, twisting it. "You're too young. People will talk. I'll look foolish, desperate." She cut herself off, shaking her head. I reached up, almost without thought, brushing a strand of hair from her face. My knuckles grazed her cheek. She froze, eyes flickering shut for half a breath. When they opened again, something inside them had shifted, less guarded, more raw. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "Then teach me." My voice came out lower than I intended, rough with something I couldn't hold back. She laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. It was surrender trying to disguise itself. She leaned into the brick wall, and I stepped closer until there was barely an inch between us. Her breath touched my chin, warm against the night air. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, the subtle warmth of skin beneath wool. "This is a mistake," she said, but her hands betrayed her, resting lightly on my chest, not pushing me away, only resting there as if to feel the rhythm of my heartbeat. "Then let it be our mistake," I murmured, leaning in, my lips hovering near hers but not yet daring. She closed her eyes, just for a second, long enough to make the world tilt, long enough to draw me into that invisible space where hesitation ends. And then, the sudden flash of headlights swept over us, a car slowing at the curb. She pulled back sharply, breath catching, eyes wide. "Don't," she said, though I couldn't tell if it was to me or to herself. We stood locked in that electric pause, the moment still trembling in the air, both of us one breath away from undoing everything. The car passed, its headlights fading, leaving us in a trembling silence under the street lamp. She held herself still, arms crossed now, as if sealing away what almost broke loose. "I shouldn't have let it get this far," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I opened my mouth to argue, but her phone buzzed again. She fumbled to silence it, but in that quick flash of the screen, I caught the name. A man's name. She saw me notice. Her hand lingered too long over the phone before slipping it back into her coat pocket. "Is he waiting for you?" I asked quietly. Her breath hitched, a fraction too long. "It's complicated." That word again. A wall between us. But her eyes darted away, and I could see the tension in her jaw, the tremor in her hand as she tucked her scarf tighter. "You're not married," I said, not as a question, but not entirely certain either. Her silence stretched. She finally shook her head. "Not anymore." Then, softer, "But it doesn't mean I'm free." The words hit me harder than I expected. My chest tightened, not with anger, but with the sudden weight of something I hadn't considered. "Why tell me now?" "Because," she whispered, stepping closer. "You look at me like there's no history. Like I'm not broken." Her nearness undid me. The faint brush of her coat against my arm. The way her breath trembled as she exhaled. The heat radiating from her body despite the cold. "You're not broken," I said, the words too raw. Her eyes flicked up, glassy, searching. For a moment, I thought she would believe me. But then she shook her head, retreating a single step, the space between us suddenly unbearable. "I don't want to hurt you," she murmured. I stepped forward, closing the gap she had tried to make. My hand almost lifted, hesitated, then finally rested lightly against her arm. Her skin flinched under the fabric, not pulling away, just trembling. "You already have," I admitted. Her lips parted, and I saw the truth of it hit her. She leaned in, half a breath closer, enough that I could feel the heat of her, smell the faint trace of her perfume carried upward. But instead of a kiss, she pressed her forehead to mine. A touch more intimate than I could stand, and more dangerous. "You don't know how much I want this," she whispered, her voice breaking. The streetlight flickered above us, and she pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Then she said it. "But if you keep walking me home tonight, there's no turning back." Her words hung between us, heavy, fragile, inevitable. And still, I didn't step away. Her words clung to me. No turning back, like a line drawn in the air between us. I should have stepped away, spared her, spared myself. But instead, I followed her down the quiet street, our footsteps in sync, the space between us charged with everything we weren't saying. She slowed when we reached her building, a narrow doorway lit by a single lamp. She stood at the threshold, one hand resting on the iron railing, the other clutching her scarf as though it could shield her from what was about to happen. "This is where you should say good night," she whispered. "I don't want to," I whispered back. Her laugh was brittle, a breath breaking in the cold. "You don't make this easy." I took one step closer. She didn't move. Another step, and I was close enough to see the faint rise of goosebumps along her neck, the way her lips parted like she was already breathing my words. "Tell me to go," I said. Her hand gripped the railing tighter. "I can't." That single confession undid both of us. She turned, pressing her back lightly to the door as though she needed it to hold her upright. I reached out, my hand brushing her hair back from her face. My fingers lingered at her temple, sliding down the line of her cheek. Her eyes closed, lashes trembling, not resisting. "Do you know what this means?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Yeah," I said. My forehead leaned toward hers until our breaths tangled in the inch of space between. She shivered, not from cold, but from being too near, too seen. Her hands rose, tentative, resting against my chest again, but this time with a steadiness that betrayed her surrender. I lowered my voice, rough and uneven. "Then don't stop me." Her lips curved, not a smile, but a breaking. "I don't want to." And finally, the space collapsed. The kiss wasn't graceful. It wasn't the careful brush of a secret. It was messy, trembling, raw. Her hand slid to my neck, pulling me closer with a need she had tried so hard to bury. I pressed against her, not pushing, just fitting into the shape of her, like we had been moving toward this from the beginning. When she broke away, her forehead rested against mine, breath unsteady, her voice shaking. "We can't take this back." I held her there, my hand at her jaw, my thumb brushing lightly across her skin. "I don't want to." Her eyes opened then, searching mine with a clarity that cut through the fear. And for the first time, she didn't look guarded. She didn't look tired. She looked seen. The street was silent around us, but in that fragile, stolen moment, nothing else mattered. We had chosen, messy, dangerous, inevitable, and we both knew there was no turning back. We didn't move right away. Her back stayed against the door, my forehead still touching hers, both of us suspended in that fragile silence after the first kiss. Our breathing slowed, steadied, until it felt like we were sharing the same air. Finally, she exhaled, long and shaky. "You're going to make my life complicated." I smiled, softer this time, not teasing. "Maybe you need complicated." Her laugh was faint, caught somewhere between disbelief and relief. She let her hand fall from my neck, but not all the way. Her fingers traced down my arm until they found my hand. And there, in the dim light, she threaded her fingers through mine. Not tentative, not hesitant. Firm, deliberate. We stood like that for a long moment, her thumb brushing across my knuckles, her eyes lowered as though she couldn't quite face what she'd just done. "You're young," she whispered, repeating the fear that had hung between us since the beginning. "And you're afraid," I whispered back. She looked up at me then, really looked. Her eyes were damp, but her mouth was steady. "I don't want to ruin you." I squeezed her hand. "You won't. If anything, you'll ruin me if you let me go." Her silence was answer enough. She leaned forward, resting her head against my chest, and I wrapped my arms around her. It wasn't frantic or rushed anymore. It was grounding. She fit against me with a softness that felt both strange and inevitable. The night was cool, the street lamp buzzing faintly above us, but the warmth between us was enough. She smelled faintly of perfume and city air, and when I pressed a light kiss into her hair, she didn't pull away. She sighed into me instead, her breath soft against my shirt. "We'll have to be careful," she murmured. I nodded, holding her tighter. "We will, but let's not waste tonight worrying." She tilted her head up, and I kissed her forehead, gentle, lingering, not demanding anything more than this closeness. Her eyes closed at the touch, and when she opened them again, the guardedness was gone. There was no denying what we were anymore. The risk, the gap, the questions. Yes, they would follow us. But so would this. The moment where she finally let herself be seen, and I finally stopped pretending I could look away. Her fingers squeezed mine once more, as if sealing something unspoken. Then she unlocked the door behind her, stepped inside, and pulled me with her, not in secrecy, but in quiet certainty. For the first time that night, it felt simple. Messy, yes. Complicated, always. But also simple. She chose me, and I chose her. And that was enough. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?